But let's start with your idea, because obviously without an idea, we got nowhere to go. Now, what I would tell you, number one, top line thing, this is the most important part when it comes to the idea. It has to be something that you either know a lot about or you're fascinated to learn about. Now, what I mean by this, because podcasting, it's not an overnight thing. You're not going to launch a podcast and all of a sudden have 1,000 people downloading your podcast day one. I mean, you might, but very unlikely. It's going to take time. So that means whatever you're creating, you've got to enjoy it. You've got to love it. Otherwise, you will not last. So if it's a subject matter that you're really into, it doesn't matter what it is. I don't care what it is at all. If you are into a specific type of book or author, if you're into, Warhammer, computer games, tea, racing, whatever it is, just make sure, as I said, you either know a hell of a lot about it or you are fascinated to learn more about it. So, for instance, I do a true crime podcast. I do a true crime podcast. Now, it's something I was fascinated with before I obviously started creating podcasts. It kind of happened by accident as well. I didn't actually set out to create a crime podcast. That kind of happened by accident, but it's something I was already fascinated about. And obviously, my podcast is in the world of the American justice system, which I find insane and fascinating. And I want to learn more about it. I also love learning about people's lives. So interviewing people I enjoy asking questions. So it's something I just really love doing. Okay, I'm certainly no expert when it comes to the law. I'm learning more and more as I go along, but this is what it's all about. I'm fascinated to learn more, and I want to keep learning, and I want to keep doing the show for my own enjoyment, because I enjoy what I do or what I'm doing. So that is the number one thing. Make sure whatever you're doing a podcast on, you love it. Don't just do a podcast because you think, oh, it's what everyone wants to hear. So don't just do a crime podcast. You think, oh my God, the crime podcasts are popular. I'm going to make one of those. I'll give you the hot tip. I would try to avoid crime podcasts if I were you, because they're very hard to sell to advertisers. So if you're looking to make a good amount of money, stay away from crime podcasting, because a lot of companies are terrified to attach themselves to crime podcasts. But you know what? If you are fascinated in that world, psychology or whatever, sure, go for it. But that is my number one tip. When you're looking for an idea, stick with what you know. Doesn't matter what it is. If you're an expert on all things Harry Potter, whatever it might be, because you will find your audience. You won't be the only person in the world who loves that thing. You will have, millions of people that will be into what you're into. So that's the main tip when coming up with your idea. Now, once you have your idea, I would then set about trying to work out how many episodes you can get out of that idea, because you want longevity. Again, this isn't going to happen overnight. So you want to be able to create a lot of episodes, whether it's you want to do 1 a week, 2 a week, whatever it might be, just start writing out episodes. So say you were doing a podcast about dog training. Okay, so episode 1, bringing your new puppy home, or even before that, how to choose your new puppy, what breed to choose. Bringing your new puppy home, what to buy for your new puppy. Just keep writing down all the potential episode content. Just write and write and write and write. Come up with as many as you can. Now, if you find you're getting stuck at about 5, 10, even 15, and you're really struggling, you might need to look at adjusting what you're talking about, making it broader potentially, or changing the idea altogether. So what I mentioned before is like, if you're into a particular author, if say that was you, say you're into a particular author. I'm into, I don't know, I'm not really a big reader. J.K. Rowling, it's the only author I really can think of off the top of my head. But you might have to go, okay, well, how many books has this author got? Am I going to run out of ideas? Am I going to run out of things to talk about with this particular author? Should I broaden it out to maybe, authors who write in the similar genre or whatever it might be? So step 1, the idea, know it, love it, or want to know more about it. Step 2, plan out some episodes. Now, they don't have to be fully detailed. You don't have to, plan out every aspect of every episode. Just a headline, just a subject matter. Back to the dog podcast. How to choose the puppy that's right for you, or the breed of dog that's right for you. What to buy for your new puppy. bringing your new puppy home, socialization, da 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 da, and all the way, and just keep listing potential of it. That's all you need, just a headline, and you can do the rest later. And if you can, if you're doing 50, you could get 50, 60, whatever, fantastic. If you think about it, there's 52 weeks in the year. So if you want to do an episode a week, 52 episodes, and you're golden. You at least got a year under your belt, and you'll find that you'll have more ideas as they come along. Because longevity is what it's all about. So once you've got your idea, you've got an idea on episodes, what I want you to then do is try and expand on those. So there is so many podcasts I listen to where it's literally just either one person talking for half an hour about a subject or two people in a room talking for an hour, nonstop, back and forth on a subject. And it's exhausting. And there's so many of them. You've got to try and find a way to stand out. What can you do that is different to other people? So once you've got your idea, go through and try and find other podcasts that are that idea. Because I almost guarantee you will not come up with an original idea. You will not have a podcast that someone hasn't already started or is doing or anything like that. I mean, if you do, fantastic. But I'm almost certain that won't happen. I know when I was thinking about crime at bedtime, I know one of the listeners of my show was like, "Oh, I listen to 1 Minute Remaining as I'm falling asleep at night." And I went, "Hold on a second." And I started looking into it. I was like, doing some research, and it seemed that a lot of people listen to their favorite podcasts as they fall asleep. So I'm like, why don't I create a crime podcast, but that is essentially made for people who are falling asleep at night? So, no gunshots, nothing like that, just nice, relaxing music and a crime story. Great. Fantastic. I've got an original idea. I mean, I didn't have an original idea. But I went, okay, so there's already podcasts that are designed for crime stories at night, sleep stories involving crime. What can I do that's different? So I went, how about like a mindfulness sort of exercise within the podcast, like a breathing exercise to everybody relaxed and ready for sleep. So there's mindful podcasts to help you go to sleep, and then there's crime podcasts. So why don't we combine the two? So we'll start with the story, or a little bit of a hook of the story so people know what's coming. And then we go, hey, we're going to come back to that. But before we do, we're going to take a minute, take a breath, do a breathing exercise to help us relax before we get into the story. And that was my sort of, I suppose, point of difference. Not a huge point of difference, but it is something different. You can tend to find, bigger points of difference. Like obviously with 1 minute remaining, my point of difference was, and again, this had already been done. I wasn't the first person to ever speak to people who are in prison for a crime, and talk to them from prison, but there weren't many, maybe one or two other ones that were doing full-on interviews with inmates every single episode. So my point of difference then was to go, okay, so there are interviews with people who are in prison, but they are just straight interviews, just like, so how did you end up in prison? What was your childhood like? It was kind of this backward and forward tennis match of just a sort of straight interview. And I want, hold on a second, we can do more with that. We can create a bit more of a narrative. I can do the music, take people on the journey, the criminal justice system. We'll have an attorney who joins us up. There's every story to give his feedback. So that was me building on that idea, going, okay, so my idea is to talk to people who are in prison, but how can I extend on that? Well, I like shows like Making a Murderer, where it's this full investigation. But I'm not going to go that crazy because that would be too much. But why don't I meet halfway and do a sort of semi-investigation, put in some music, make it more of a story. And then I was like, okay, but I know nothing about the criminal justice system. I need an attorney. Get an attorney on board who's willing to come on and chat with me about each story as we move forward. So that's what I mean by extending on your idea. So finding other little things that you can do that someone else might not be doing, whether that's getting you the audience involved. So for instance, let's go back to the dog podcast idea. I'm a big fan of dog training and that sort of stuff. It's kind of a little bit of a hobby of mine. So I do listen to the occasional dog podcast, and I hear the same things out time and time again. These guys are phenomenal experts when it comes to the subject matter, but the trouble is they don't obviously have the background of podcasting. So the editing is poor. There's 2-hour-long episodes with stuff in there that just doesn't need to be in there. And they're missing out on other opportunities, like getting the audience involved, because the biggest thing about the dog training world is so many people have questions about their dogs that they need fixed. I mean, you look at any of these dog trainer, guys who go live on Facebook or Instagram, their feed goes crazy with questions about, oh, my dog this, my dog that, my dog this, bring that to your podcast. Set up a number with a voicemail. It's easy done. And say, hey, here's the number. Got a problem, got a question, call. They record their question. You then can use that audio recording in your episode. Speaking of dogs, that's my dog just now shaking. Thank you. You can then bring that audio to your episode so they actually have the person asking the question themselves. And that, again, that is a point of difference. It's something that someone else is not doing. So someone might go, oh, I kind of like this. I kind of like hearing these questions coming through. So there's a point of difference there. So that's what you're going to do. So idea number 1, something you know and love, or something you want to know more about and learn about. Number 2, having lots of opportunity for episodes, writing down your list. Number 3, how can I expand on this idea? If you're doing a sports podcast and you're really into footy, can you go to your local footy ground and get little audiograms from people at the game? Hey, what did you think? So that when you're doing an episode on whatever it was, the Broncos v. the Titans, we were there on the ground and got some fan reactions, and then you're putting that in. It's something, again, different. Because what I mentioned before about these podcasts that are like one person talking or two people talking for like 2 hours straight, it's very taxing on someone listening. It's been very hard to keep someone's attention for that length of time without them zoning out, unless it's like you're interviewing, a huge name like Elon Musk or something like that, and people are hanging on every word that they say, and they're going to listen the whole way through. So how can you maintain their interest throughout that episode? And I do that in my shows with narration, with music, with sound effects. 1 minute we've got the inmate talking, then it's me talking, sound effects because they're telling a story, and then the gunshots went off and we've got the gunshots. So there's lots of stuff to keep people's attention and make them go, oh, wow. And you can do that with a straight interview podcast as well, or with just a 2-person show. Look for opportunities to add color to your episodes. So that in a nutshell is the idea sphere. Okay, so number 1, it is, what's your idea? Number 2, episodes. Number 3, how can we expand on that idea? Don't forget, as I said, go out, listen to other shows that are similar to yours or are doing the same idea as you want to do. Hear how they do it. Hear what you like. Hear what you don't like. And use that. So if they're doing things that you like, there's nothing wrong with stealing either, guys. Like, not literally like grabbing audio from their podcast and using it. But as I said, no idea is new. Like, there's a quote that I'm going to absolutely butcher, but it's something along the lines of good artists copy, great artists steal. Now, it means you may not be the first to try something, but you did it so well that everyone thinks of you when they see it or when they hear it. So that's the same with me with the interview, like with the 1 Minute Remaining podcast, interviewing inmates. I wasn't the first person to do it, but I think because of the way I've done it and the way it's been perceived and come across, people assume, or when they think about people who are being interviewed in prison, they kind of think of 1 Minute Remaining. So that's the idea. So as I said, I wasn't the first person to come up with that idea. I just wanted to create something a bit more high production and all the rest of it, so that when people thought of inmates being interviewed, they think of 1 Minute Remaining. So whatever you come up with, make you the one that everyone thinks of when they think of that particular genre or whatever you're doing. So yeah, I think that's all of it.